High expectations laid for Tinubu government on the steel sector. Tonight we engage the Ministry of Steel Development on the plans and the issues within the sector. How much can the Tinubu government really get in this sector? And recent crime situation in the FCT, the nation's capital, gets us talking us up with worries over kidnappings and different shades of criminality. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to you. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Wakimale in Abuja. Before we get talking tonight in some of those issues that will give you an understanding of what whether or not the Tinubu government really has a concrete idea of how to make money, because those who will tell you that if you want to make money, there is one sector that can give you a lot of money. Whether they are thinking in that direction of getting the right things done, we'll be finding out tonight. But let's tell you that there's been an arrest of a vessel carrying Nigerian stolen crude off the coast of Ajaokuta Kingdom in Nigeria's South region. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, in company of top officials of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, today inspected a vessel caught with about 200,000 liters of stolen crude. The vessel was arrested by a joint sting operation carried out by the Nigerian Navy and the private security firm, Tantita Security Services. 23 suspects were caught on the vessels, and the CDS assured the NNPCL and Nigerians that the Chief of Defense Intelligence would commence investigation immediately to unravel the criminals behind the act. Today, we shall be delving into the steel sector. And the Honorable Minister for the Steel Development is here with me in the studio. But before we get talking, everyone, let's check out some of your political stories across the state of the nation.
The 2024 Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration has been marked in states of the Federation today, and in Abuja, President Bola Tinubu performed the wreath-laying ceremony. All service chiefs, led by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, and heads of other security agencies, amongst others, also took part in the ceremony. They also laid wreath during the event. The program, which is organized yearly to commemorate Nigeria's fallen heroes, also witnessed other activities such as prayers, gun salutes, and the releasing of pigeons at the National Arcade at the Eagle Square in Abuja. Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State has been sworn in for his second term in office as governor of Imo State months after he was re-elected last year. The governor took the oath of office at around 3:24 p.m. at the Dan Anyam Stadium in Owerri, the Imo State capital. President Bola Tinubu, ex-president Olusegun Obasanjo, the Senate President Godswill Akpabio, the Speaker of the House of Representatives Tajuddin Abbas, and other All Progressives Congress leaders were among those in attendance. The governor promised that within the first 12 months of the new tenure, every community in Imo State will feel the impact, with at least one significant project fully executed for them in the state. The Supreme Court today reserved judgment in the appeal filed by the governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Tonye Cole, against the victory of the Rivers State Governor, Siminalayim Fubara, in the March 18, 2023 governorship election. The APC governorship candidate is asking the court to make pronouncements over the contention that there were irregularities, non-compliance with the Electoral Act, and Fubara's continuous signing of documents as the Rivers State's Accountant General after his nomination as the governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party is unlawful. The Rivers State House of Assembly, led by Martin Amiawele, has invited for screening the 9 commissioners who resigned their positions. The House did this in a statement by the clerk of the Rivers State House of Assembly, Emeka Amadi. It is believed that this move is part of the 8-point peace agenda signed by Governor Sim Fubara of Rivers State, and FCT Minister Nyesom Wike included the reappointment of the commissioners who resigned. Members of the PDP Rebirth Movement are calling for the resignation of the party's Board of Trustees acting chairman, Senator Adolphus Wabara, describing his continued stay in office as illegal. The convener of the group, Mr. Mai Ikoku, told journalists at a news conference in Abuja that the PDP constitution has no provision for an acting Board of Trustees chairman. The group also blames the PDP's failure to win the presidential elections for 3 consecutive cycles on impunity within the party.
Thank you so much, everyone. Tonight, we shall be diving into the steel sector and Nigeria's mining potentials. One area a lot of the experts have said that if the Tinubu government could make some reasonable mark, is going to be in the steel sector. But tonight, there is a sad scenario, just like in so many sectors of Nigeria. For 45 years, there is perhaps one of the most expensive infrastructural development project that Nigeria has embarked upon. At an initial $1 billion or so, that was earmarked 1979. And 45 years later, that project has not produced any steel, and that is Ajaokuta Steel Company of Nigeria. Now, it's been through several legal contract issues and several production problems. Every year, there are budget allocation to Ajaokuta, yet not a single steel has been produced out of that. Well, the Tinubu government has created the Steel Development Ministry, and they've said they are taking steel development seriously, and they're looking into reviving the Ajaokuta steel development. A lot of experts have their own issues regarding steel production, especially as it concerns Ajaokuta. Can that curse of 45 years be upturned under this government? I'm being joined tonight by the Honorable Minister of Steel Development, Prince Shoaib Abubakar Audu. He joins us live here in our studio. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sean. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much. You are in a ministry that a lot of people will say, what a ministry, in the sense that a lot of people have called Ajaokuta a cursed project. For 45 years, a lot of Nigerians who are watching, and young people who were born at the time, have heard about Ajaokuta.
So I want to wish Nigerians and the armed forces a happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day. Back to Ajaokuta, you are correct. It's been a project that has been ongoing for about 4.5 decades, 45 years. It's a difficult task that so many successive governments have failed to be able to produce steel. However, the president, as a visionary, has taken a different perspective. He understands that no nation can develop without steel. If you look at the US and the UK, they had their own industrial revolution in the early 1900s. The fact of the matter is that if we get it right, this could be the beginning of the industrial revolution in Nigeria. And Mr. President understands that under the Renewed Hope agenda. I think there are 3 things that Mr. President is looking to do in Ajaokuta through the Steel Development Ministry, which he created in August 2023 and appointed me as the Minister of the Steel Development Ministry. Number 1 is that there are 44 production units, production plants in Ajaokuta. It's a massive project. It's a massive plant sitting on about 24,000 hectares of land, which is bigger than the size of Abuja, to put in perspective. About 800 hectares, the plant sits on about 800 hectares of that land.
Land space.
Yes, of that land space. So Mr. President has said that as opposed to using a big bang approach and trying to tackle all the problems at once, let's use a collegiate system and address the problem in piecemeal. So there are a number of things that we're looking to do very quickly. One is to start the production of iron rods. So we want to revitalize the light steel mill of the Ajaokuta Steel Complex to be able to produce iron rods. To be able to revamp the entire plant, based on estimates from experts that I've spoken to and that we've looked at, will cost about 2 to 5 billion US dollars. Now, the light steel section mill of Ajaokuta steel plant is going to cost us about 35 billion naira. Mr. President gave me approval sometime late last year to raise the money locally to be able to revive that section of the steel plant. Now, if you look at what the Ministry of Works is trying to do, I've been in touch with him. We're working very closely and collaboratively. The federal government, under the Renewed Hope agenda, plans to build about 30,000 kilometers of roads across the 6 geopolitical zones. That would require about 7 million metric tons over the first 4 years of this administration. Ajaokuta has capacity to produce 400,000 tons.
Presently in the country,
Yeah.
all the steel used and the iron rods used for our road construction are imported. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, there's some local production that is being done, but a small fraction. There's some local production. Most of the local production that is being done are being done using scrap metals. So most of the companies and the developers prefer to have them imported. So a larger chunk, billions of dollars is spent on steel importation into Nigeria, which the president wants to reverse.
So if I may quickly ask, in all of these, over the years, you say scrap, but if you revitalize the light steel mill,
yes.
From what natural resource would that come, raw material would that come from?
So part of what we plan to do is, so there are 2 ways to approach it. One is to mine the iron ore. Once we mine the iron ore and the other natural resources like limestone, dolomite, coking coal,
which we have in Kogi,
yes, which we have
in several
Kogi
states of the
in
Federation.
the North Central region. You can also use that, get a blast furnace to be able to now convert that into iron rods. However, part of what we plan to do is to import the billets and then roll those billets into iron rods. That's a second approach. I think that's a quicker method of approaching or solving the problem on day one. Of getting production going. Yeah. Now, we've also done the analysis. Using that approach is significantly more cheaper than importing the finished iron rods into the country. I think based on the analysis that was done, we'll save about 500 billion naira over 4 years.
How soon can this light steel mill produce its first iron rods?
I think if we're lucky, if we have the support of all the parties, and if we work very hard, we're targeting to have that come out this year, before the end of this year. And Mr. President is determined to have us do that.
So but you need the 35 billion naira support fund to get it up to scratch.
Yes, Mr. President has said that we should raise the money from the money market locally. We've spoken to various financial institutions who have shown significant amount of interest in giving us the money. In fact, we have quite a number of term sheets on the table already. So we should be able to get that off the ground very quickly.
So if 35 billion naira is needed to get the light mill started,
yes,
section of the Ajaokuta, how much annually do you hope to get out of that mill?
So if we're able to...
In revenue.
So the 35 billion naira would help us to make about 50,000 tons of the iron rods that is required. Now it has capacity to go up to 400,000 tons. If we now ramp up to 400,000 tons, now we have an offtake agreement with the Ministry of Works, like I mentioned, that wants to create about 30,000 kilometers of roads across Nigeria. There are also other, companies that, are building bridges, state governments, companies that are building, houses and all of that needs iron rods and steel. So we think that we could generate hundreds of billions of naira in profit. In
empirical terms,
yes,
as a private sector person,
yeah,
coming from the private sector, if you are collecting a facility, credit from as a capital raise,
yeah,
you definitely are going to have done your mathematics in what the return on investment will be.
Yes.
So in actual term, if you take, let's say the mid capacity, if you produce to mid capacity, would you be meeting what is the return on investment? What is the figure exactly that you're looking at annually?
So if for this 35 billion naira worth of money that we're raising, for the 50,000 tons, by the time we sell it at the prevailing international market price, perhaps we'll sell it slightly below so that there's some spread and there's still some discount from, there's some incentive to buy from us. At that 35 billion, we should be able to make about 40 to 50 billion in terms of returns on investment.
So that's a margin of about 10 to 15 billion in terms of the disparity between the money spent and the profit.
Correct, for that 50,000 tons. However, if we ramp up to 400,000 tons, that goes significantly upwards by about 8 times or so from the numbers
that is the immediate target that your ministry has.
Correct.
And that is what the agenda of this government is all about.
Yes.
But you've not told us what exactly is the problem of 45 years. What has this government identified as the problem of the 45 years old?
I think part of the issue has been, there's been no political will. This is the first time in our 63-year history since independence that the federal government, that the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has created a steel ministry. He understands that the Industrial Revolution would hinge on the Ministry of Steel. There's been some concession arrangements that was done in the past where the concessionaires that were brought in didn't have the competence and the skill required to be able to carry out the job. So those were some of the challenges. And the iron ore that was supposed to be used for the production of the steel was actually being imported out of the country by the previous concessionaires. So we had so many challenges, and the agreements was not done in the interest of Nigeria. For example, the last concession agreement that was done with Global Steel was terminated, and we had to pay about $496 million to the Indian company that that concession agreement was terminated with. So these are some of the challenges.
So in all of this, has anyone, because this is a similar case of contractual deal pushing the federal government into misstep, and at the end of the day, the federal government makes these mistakes and errors, and then the federal government, the Nigerian people, through the taxpayers' money, will have to pay back those P&ID cases. One very case that is very evident. Has anybody been found worthy of punishment for these misdeeds?
Well, I think it's, these are things that have happened through successive governments. There are commissions of inquiries that have been set up by successive governments, and I believe those things have been looked into, and they will continue to be looked into. I think that ultimately, there has to be consequences for some of these things that were not done.
But are we out of the woods contractually?
Yes, we're out of the woods. That $500 million roughly payment that we made has allowed Ajaokuta to be sort of free from any major
Ajaokuta is now a Nigerian company.
Yes, owned by the federal government.
Owned by the federal government,
yes.
100%.
Yes.
But the steel company is still 98% complete.
It was 98% complete by the early 90s, by 1994. However, the technology has not been updated. Some of the equipments, were carted away by, some of the people that were managing the plants previously. So a lot of work needs to be done, and we started that process. We've gone on tours, globally to international steel plants. We've seen companies that are actually producing steel. Whatever company that the plant is concessioned to has to have capacity to be able to, get steel production coming out of Ajaokuta ultimately.
Successive governments have allocated billions to Ajaokuta, leading to a cumulative project cost of 49 billion naira. Is that the same figures that you have? That's been a money guzzler. Minister, budget allocations to Ajaokuta still include 3.9 billion in 2016, 4.27 billion in 2017, 4.2 billion in 2020, 108 million as export expansion grant in 2019. In estimate, if you are counting our loss, this money guzzler called Ajaokuta, how much has gone into it? Do we have a figure?
Shell, what I would say, right, is that if we start recounting all the problems that have happened in the last 45 years, we're not going to make any progress. Mr. President, like I mentioned, is a visionary. He looks forward. And Nigeria is a country that has had many problems in the past. We have the capacity to be able to turn around some of these things. We want to get Ajaokuta producing. Ajaokuta is a massive plant that if we get some of the low-hanging fruits producing, some of the production units, some of the production plants they're producing, even when we bring a company to handle the concession, the pricing would be much higher. So it's in the interest of Nigeria for us to invest in getting Ajaokuta back on track somewhat. Now, the light steel mill alone that we're looking to revive would create about 5,000 direct and indirect jobs for Nigerians. If we revive the plant in its entirety and carry out some of the other initiatives that we're carrying out with bringing in new steel plants and international companies to set up steel plants, we would create northwards of 500,000 jobs and bringing in excess of $10 billion in foreign direct investment. So Mr. President is looking forward. And, if we're able to bring that amount of money into Nigeria, it's going to be a game changer.
So in all of this right now, there's still a lot of issues. Which day was that we understand that the TCN disconnected? It was last Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah.
That TCN disconnected Ajaokuta still from the national grid. Has that been resolved?
Just
because they said they've not paid debt of 33 billion owed to the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC.
Just for clarity, it hasn't actually been disconnected. There was a letter, sort of a warning letter that was sent to Ajaokuta. I spoke to the MD of Ajaokuta again today. We had a conversation. Just to quickly provide a summary of what happened, about 9 billion is what is actually being owed in electricity tariffs over the last 10 years to NBET. Now, the interest element on that 9 billion is about 24 billion.
What were they using the light for, the electricity, since they were producing nothing?
Well, it's not that they were producing nothing. It's a massive...
Did they produce anything?
Yeah. They had some concessionaires in there that were managing the plant, and some production activities was happening on a small scale, not on a large scale.
What were they producing? So
they tried to, for example, the engineering workshop, was being used to produce some plates and all of that. They had produced some rebars previously in the past and things like that. On a small scale. It wasn't
they were just running whatever. Well, just to do some activities that largely irrelevant to the global picture.
Yeah, I won't say irrelevant, but on a small scale that is not significant enough to impact the big picture.
And they've accrued this kind of debt.
And they are
unable to pay it.
And they've been unable to pay it so far. However, in my discussions with the MD of Ajaokuta, part of the solution that we're trying to put on board is that there is a power plant there, about 110 megawatt power plant. We need to do some financial engineering to be able to resolve the problem. So part of what we're going to do is to reach a PPP partnership. That's part of what we're thinking about, to do a public-private partnership to be able to do that on the power plant. If we're able to do that on the power plant and hand it over to a private company that pays us some significant amount of money, we can now use that to pay most of the debt, if not all of the debt, and still have some money accrued to Ajaokuta. So some financial engineering and thinking outside the box is what is required to solve the problem.
So by December this year, Honorable Minister, if I call you back onto this program, you should be able to report to Nigerians that we are producing from the light mill.
Absolutely.
That is a promise to
If we have the support of, Nigerians. But
no, look at the camera.
Yes.
Look, you're looking straight into the camera and you're talking to Nigerians.
Yes.
If you make this promise tonight, today is the 15th day of January, and the Tinubu government, under your leadership in the Ministry of State Development, is making promise to Nigerians that the curse of 45 years will be broken this year by the Tinubu government by you getting up to scratch and producing steel from Ajaokuta. Is that a promise?
Yes, that's the plan. But I want you to, I always believe in under-promising and over-delivering. So part of what I don't want us to put a specific, timeline to say Nigerians work. What I'm trying to tell you is that we're doing everything humanly possible, and we're poised to produce steel in the form of iron rods from Ajaokuta before the end of the year.
We should hold you accountable to
yes. And you can hold me accountable
I
to
wish
that.
you the very best.
Yes.
To the interest of Nigeria, if this works, there's been a lot of disappointment over the years. And if this happens, it will be a plus to Nigerians, not only to this government, but to Nigerians, because Nigerians are supposed to be the one to benefit. There's been failures for 45 years. If that is broken, it will be good news. But then we understand now that there is a plan to start another company, a steel company, from the scratch. Now, there are those who have their fears. Even Ajaokuta, for example, there are those experts who had criticized that there was not a proper plan of how the steel was going to be transported out of this. Steel is a heavy commodity when it's produced. But the Ajaokuta lacked the infrastructure to be able to transport whatever that is produced. Have you been able to resolve that?
Yes. So let me just touch quickly and address the issue on Ajaokuta, and then I'll talk about the new steel companies that are looking to come into Nigeria. In terms of Ajaokuta, part of what we're doing, in addition to restarting the light steel mill, is we want to produce military hardwares in Ajaokuta steel. I've been working very closely with the Minister of Defense, Alhaji Badaru, and the Minister of Works, Senator Umahi, to work hand in hand to produce iron rods in Ajaokuta and to produce military hardware capabilities in Ajaokuta, whether it's helmets, whether it's bullets, whether it's vests, whether it's parts for tanks and ships and all of those things, or rifles, ammunitions. We have capacity to be able to do all of that. So part of what we're going to do is that once we raise this money and start on a small scale and show a proof of concept, then we can then ramp up. For the military hardware capacity, we're going to restart the engineering workshop in Ajaokuta to be able to get it back on track and to be able to design and build things for military hardware. And it's important
for
us
the original plan. This is a hard hook.
No, this
is a side step to what the larger plan was. So the question is, how effective will this be?
No, it will be very effective. It's like I mentioned
because
earlier.
You're using it for what it wasn't designed for.
No, it was.
Initially.
It was designed. I mean, it's still steel. It's still steel production in one way, form, shape, or the other. There are multiple ways to skin a cat. It's not just one size fits approach for everything. So part of what we're doing, like I mentioned, is we're thinking outside the box. We're being innovative. We're looking at solutions that will serve Nigerians and ensure that we implement the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President. If we're able to do that, we'll create tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of jobs for Nigerians. Tax payments will be significantly more, employment opportunities, the industry would now be robust, we'll turn it around and create a new life and breathe a new life into the steel industry, something that hasn't been done since independence. We've never had a steel ministry, for over 60 years of our independence. This is the first time the president has done that.
So this new idea of creating a brand new steel company, you've gone to China on a road show.
Yes.
But in all of this, why create a new steel company when you have one that is nearly moribund for 45 years? You're trying to restart anyways.
You can use multiple approaches. You don't have to only use one approach. And steel production is never enough for a country like Nigeria. Mr. President wants Nigeria to be the China of Africa. you know, a country that has...
That is Tinubu's plan.
Yes, that's Tinubu's plan, yes.
And Nigeria will be the China of the continent.
When I say China of the continent,
in the sense
I mean
of production,
in sense of industrial development, industrial production, you know, the growth of the economy, the size of the economy. He wants the economy to grow to $1 trillion by the end of his second term in 2031. He wants to create 80 million jobs by the end of 2031. He has big plans for Nigeria, and part of the implementation process of those massive plans is through the steel ministry, which is why we've gone to China. We've met with the senior executives of the Luan Steel Group, the group chairman, the group chief executive officer. They've committed to come to Nigeria. They are coming to Nigeria after the Chinese New Year. They are willing and able, and they've committed to investing billions of dollars in setting up a new steel plant. Part of what I have to do as the Ministry of Steel is to be able to start to do the groundwork in terms of finding land, finding a place that has capacity in terms of, you know, in terms of a deep sea port, in terms of availability of gas, in terms of all the relevant facilities to be able to move the heavy facilities as well. You mentioned the heavy facilities in Ajaokuta. I wanted to mention that in Ajaokuta, there's a rail line, you know, that takes us, you know, from Ajaokuta all the way to Itakpe, and even beyond that to Alaja in Delta State.
Is that completed now?
Yes, is it a
cargo? Is it a cargo? Is it an industrial rail?
Yes.
That can carry the capacity of the commodity that it's going to be produced?
Yes, correct. That's what it is. Is an industrial scale, and we can build multiple more plants because Nigerians are hungry for job opportunities. There are tens of millions of Nigerians without job, which Mr. President wants to address and wants to get a massive amount of Nigerians employed within the next 4 to 8 years. And he's poised to do it, and will do it by the special grace of God, because he has the right team in place. We're having the right conversations, we're having the right energy, we're having the right conversations. So the Chinese company is coming to invest in Nigeria. The Indian company, Jindal Steel, is also coming to Nigeria. They've committed to invest $5 billion at the sidelines of the G20 meeting in September 2023, which Mr. President attended in Delhi, India. I've met with their representatives in Nigeria, and they've committed and they've shown me their level of seriousness. You know, we're looking at various locations for both the Chinese and Indian companies. It may be somewhere, it could be through an acquisition of an existing plant, like in Alaja, the Delta Steel. It could be a greenfield location, like in Akwa Ibom, or, you know, somewhere in the southwest, like in Ogun State. There are various options that we're looking at on the table. It's not just Ajaokuta. We can solve Ajaokuta while creating other opportunities for the government, because Mr. President is hell-bent and is determined to industrialize Nigeria.
So, but it may not be, those two other companies from the Indian and the Chinese perspective may not be in the capacity of Ajaokuta. Because Ajaokuta was created to be the largest in sub-Saharan Africa. But I mean,
yes, those Chinese people. For example, when we went to China, the companies that the Luan Steel Group, their companies has a potential of producing about 20 million metric tons of steel. Ajaokuta has a capacity. Ajaokuta was designed to produce 1.3 million metric tons of steel in year one, which would double to 3.6 million metric tons. So the Chinese and the Indians could well create a steel company that could be bigger than Ajaokuta, potentially.
The issue of banditry,
yes,
and the nexus with mining in this country, are you worried about it?
Yes, it's a big worry, it's a big concern. But before I talk to that now, one thing I wanted to mention is that if you look at the combined projects and pipelines that we have, including the Chinese investments from Luan Steel Group, the Indian investments from Jindal Steel, the potential concessions of Ajaokuta, together with the iron rod production and the production of military hardware, we could bring in excess, we're poised to bring in excess of $10 billion US into Nigeria, which I mentioned earlier. And that's
FDI.
Yes, FDI, foreign direct investment.
So you're planning to concession Ajaokuta?
It's something that is on the table. We're looking at all options.
Government
to
has
resolve
failed
the
over the years, so no one will think that the government will be able to be reasonable enough to be able to run Ajaokuta going forward. I mean, there are those who will say PPP will be the way to go. Put it in private hands and make them accountable to plow the money from the portion for the Nigerian people to go back into the Nigerian purse.
Yes, but the concession would also be concession to a private company that has the capacity and skill set for steel production, right? So the government is going to take their hands off it, although government will ultimately still have a residual stake in the plant.
Yes. All right, quickly, I asked about the mining and banditry.
Yes, so in terms of the mining and the banditry, it's a concern. There's some, I even received a letter from one of the MDs of one of my agencies today in NEAMCO that he was concerned about some banditry and some illegal mining that was even taking place at some of our government-owned properties and government-owned production plants in Itakpe, in Kogi State, and the likes. Mr. President is very concerned about that. And there was a report that came out recently that Mr. President is setting up some special police units to focus on, illegal mining and some illegal activities that have been taking place. I believe the president is very serious about that. Once those types of measures are put in place, and those are the types of measures that we need to resolve the problem. And Mr. President is very determined to fix Nigeria.
Does this government think that there is a reason linked to the mining and why banditry is on the rise? There are those who will say some of the high and powerful are connected to this issue just to exploit mining processes. Do you think so?
Well, it's a complicated process, right? And I don't want to speak too much on that because these are security issues. But what I would say, I think the bottom line of what I would say is that Mr. President is very concerned about this trend. It's a trend in terms of banditry, is a concerning trend in terms of the illegal mining that is happening, is a concerning trend in terms of cutting away the natural resources of Nigeria through illegal means. And it's happening all over the country, in places with, whether it's coal mining, whether it's gold mining, all sorts of things. It's happening all over Nigeria. It's happening in Kogi, it's happening in Zamfara, it's happening in different locations. And Mr. President is concerned about solving these problems. And I believe he'll solve it very quickly in the very near future.
I wish you the very best. Ambitious plan and the agenda in this sector. I can only wish your ministry and this government very well, because at the end of the day, if there are benefits that come out of this, it's for the interest of Nigerians. And I wish you the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Sure.
Prince Shoaibu Abubakar Audu, the Honorable Minister for Steel Development. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Take a break, everyone. But when we come back, there is some kind of challenges that need to be tackled immediately. Our focus will be on the security in the FCT, kidnappings. In fact, there is an online worry about crowdsourcing funds to pay ransom for Nigerians that were kidnapped. We'll be discussing this, and Mr. Bulama Bukati, a security expert, will be joining me next on the program. Join us again, everyone. Staying with us, there are concerns about security in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, the nation's capital, not far away from the residence and the office of the president. Are issues relating to security on an everyday basis. We understand that Inspector General of Police have weighed in on this matter, and in fact, he has raised a team to tackle these issues. Kidnappings. It's gotten to a point where people, Nigerians, are discussing ransom on social media and raising funds to rescue those that have been kidnapped. And there are issues of one chance. If you understand what that means, is that you enter into a taxi and you do not know where you're going to end, whether in the den of a kidnapper or these criminals. Tonight, let's get a sense of why this is happening in the FCT, perhaps a place that is supposed to be the safest in the country. I'm being joined by Mr. Bulama Bukati, a lawyer and a security expert. He joins us virtually from London. Thank you so much, Mr. Bukati, for joining us. What do you make of this? What can you tell us about what is going on in the FCT?
Sean, what is going on in Abuja is a reflection of what has been happening across Nigeria. If you look at the data, you would see that over 9,700 people were killed last year, that is in 2023, across Nigeria. And last December, over 880 Nigerians were killed and over 600 were abducted across the country. And Abuja cannot be immune to that, because as long as you leave insecurity to fester and flourish across Nigeria, then it will find its way to Abuja. Sean, you and I have held several conversations here last year in which we highlighted and warned that violent terrorist groups and criminal gangs have been moving from northwestern Nigeria and northeastern Nigeria to states across Abuja. And so Abuja currently borders 4 states that are harboring criminal and terrorist cells in their forests: Kaduna, Nasarawa, Niger, and Kogi. All of these 4 states harbor terrorist cells in the forests that are neighboring Abuja. And now these criminal gangs and terrorist organizations have been able to find a way of coming to communities close to Abuja and abducting and killing and maiming individuals. From October 2013 to December 2013, the last 3 months of last year, over 200 people were either killed or abducted in Abuja, in the Federal Capital Territory. And it is not just abductions and kidnappings, it is also increasing armed robbery across Abuja. In major junctions across Abuja, criminals and armed robbers masquerading as taxi drivers and as other businessmen in the city, kill, maim, and rob unsuspecting Nigerians in a way that we have not seen before. Abuja is becoming one of the scariest cities in the world. Is becoming one of the scariest federal capitals in the world. And I think the federal government needs to pay more attention to this crisis so that it doesn't drive away foreign investors, diplomats, and other visitors to Nigeria and affect Nigeria's international standing.
Now, it's so sad that, that Nabiha was said to have been killed in the kidnappers' den. And I'm very sure that you are conversant with this conversation online with a former Minister of Communication, Ali Pantami, who went on Twitter, who was even talking about one of his friends who is donating money. A part of his the tweet or the message that he put out on social media, part of it reads, let me just read part of it. He said, "Furthermore, I spoke with a friend and a brother who offered to pay the remaining 50 million naira of the 60 million. Immediately, I conveyed the account number of the father of our daughters, Mansour Al-Kadia, to the friend and brother to send the money directly. Any additional amount earlier generated from yesterday, the father can use to treat the daughters and other family members, inshallah." He says, "It's become clear we lost our daughter Nabiha yesterday, and the 5 remaining daughters have been threatened. As I spoke with the father on one matter yesterday." Sad scenario of what is happening in in Nigeria, and when we wonder, a city that is supposed to be highly fortified, and it brings back the sad scenario of the attack on police headquarters, the United Nations headquarters. And the reason why this kind of conversation is very important, not only because some of these institutions are important, but the lives of people, especially those who live in Maitama, for example, in the city center, you have all these criminalities going on. But the question is that, why has it risen? You've identified that there are cells within and around the FCT, but why the audacity to come into the FCT, a place that's supposed to be highly fortified?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, this incident that you cited is a sad incident of 6 sisters who were abducted around 7th January along with their father. And when they reached the criminal or terrorist den, they ended up releasing the father, asking him to go and source ransom in the sum of 60 million naira, which is 10 million naira per individual. And they later then gave the father the deadline of the 12th of January that if he does not bring 60 million naira, they would kill the sisters. And at the end of the day, when the ultimatum expired, they killed one of the sisters and threatened to kill the remaining if they don't raise the money quickly. And of course, the former Minister Isa Ali Fantami's intervention is commendable in the case of this family. Unfortunately, I was reading in one of the major national newspapers earlier, I don't remember specifically which, that reported that the kidnappers have now raised the ransom for the sisters. They are now demanding 100 million naira per individual instead of the 10 million naira they asked previously. This is just one example of what is going on in Abuja. A close family, a family friend of ours lost her life just like 10 days ago. Shown Habiba Ocheni was her name. She took an Uber driver inside Abuja. She disappeared without reaching her destination. And 3 days later, she was found in the mortuary dead. And she's another example. So there are many examples. And like you said, it is the criminal gangs that are surrounding Abuja, but there are other causes. The economic situation in the country is making more and more Nigerians desperately poor. More young people are unemployed. And when young people are unemployed, then they become candidates for criminality, candidates for being recruited into terrorist and criminal gangs. Secondly, showing criminality pays in Nigeria, unfortunately. We don't see individuals who have committed acts of terrorism or criminality, violent criminality, being arrested, investigated, and prosecuted, especially their leaders. And in this case that we are talking about, Sean, 60 million naira, if 60 million naira was paid to this gang, let's assume they invested 5 million naira, which is unlikely to conduct this operation. It means they had made a profit of 55 million naira in 1 week, between 7th January and 15th January. Showing which business in Nigeria makes 55 million in a week. So criminality pays, there are no consequences to crime, and it is clear that the government efforts, ongoing government efforts, security efforts, leave much to be desired.
But what do you think leadership, because the IGP, we understand, has raised a team, but there is a leadership, there is a minister for the FCT, there is a senator in charge of the FCT, the president lives in the FCT, and things are deteriorating. What do you imagine could be done right now?
Yeah, I mean, John, of course, things are deteriorating. What you would need to see right now is a decisive action, sustained decisive action by security and law enforcement agencies, not only to secure Abuja, but to secure the whole country. Like I said, it is a fallacy for you to think you can secure Abuja when the whole of the country is on fire. So the way to secure Abuja is to take the fight to the terrorists and criminal gangs inside the bull, inside the forest, not just in the north central and the northwestern parts of Nigeria where which border Abuja, but also to other parts of Nigeria. Because the more criminal gangs fester and flourish, the more money they get, the more experience they get, the more audacious they become, and the more they launch deadly attacks. Now that we are seeing these reports in Abuja, the Minister of Steel Development, Sheon, just talked to you about foreign investment. These kinds of incidents, insecurity and criminality across the Federal Capital Territory is going to discourage foreign investors from investing in Nigeria. It is going to discourage diplomats from living in Abuja, and that will affect Nigeria's international standing. It is going to affect our economy in a big way, but also because of this insecurity, unemployment, illiteracy, and other evils will continue to fester in the country. And so the government has to see insecurity, tackling insecurity as a priority.
But Mr. Bukati, I'm worried though. In the early months of President Tinubu in office, there seems to be some kind of dowsing in the activities, in these criminalities. But what could have, from towards the end of November and December, from what we saw from Beacon Consulting report of the year ending, it showed that there was a rise in the rate of criminality and violent activities in Nigeria. And the kind of stories and reports that we've gotten in the early days of this year, they're not looking good. So what suddenly happened?
Yeah, insecurity has always ebbed and flowed in the country. So it is never one trajectory. It always goes up and down. And you are right that earlier in 2023, we saw a downward trajectory in insecurity. It could be part of the efforts taken by the new administration, but it could also be coincidence or a combination of both. And then what we saw in the last quarter of last year was an exponential rise in insecurity across the country, including in Abuja. And of course, like I said, there are seasons we know where insecurity goes up and there are seasons when they go down. There are factors, of course, that allow them to go up at some periods. There are times where we see them going down. And of course, what we are now seeing is an upward trajectory, but that's because the root causes are not being addressed. The fight to the criminal and terrorist gangs is not enough. Much is left to be desired. And I think the only way to secure Nigeria is to take the fight to them instead of waiting for them to strike, and then you are always in the defensive.
But we thought that we had it covered. We have the air prowess and the ground capacity to be able to root these people out. Is this a unified tendency that we're seeing, this banditry, or they are just cells and different elements that are operating for criminality? Do they have an ideology, just like we saw in the Northeast region? Who are these bandits? Do they have names, or they just have a scattered? They're not. Are they organized in any way?
So, Sean, unfortunately, insecurity has become a hydra-headed monster that is consuming thousands of lives every year in Nigeria and destroying hundreds of thousands of livelihoods per year. And like you said, there are different groups operating in different countries, in different parts of Nigeria, but there are parts where you have more than one group. As for the Boko Haram crisis, thankfully, we have seen a decrease in the number of fatalities in the Northeast, especially in the last few months. But unfortunately, things are now also getting worse there. In the Northwest and the North Central, most of the criminal actors are bandit terrorists. And these bandit terrorists are estimated to be around 30,000 people divided into about 100 groups. So you would say it's like 100 small groups with around 300 members each of them. And they operated in the Northwest and now in the Northeast. And of course, in the North Central. And of course, in the North Central, evidence shows that there are Boko Haram factions, especially Ansaru and ISWAP, also operating there. Those are ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliates that enjoy the support of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and some of them get from ISIS to continue their operations in the North Central in particular. But as for the bandits, they do not have a serious ideology. But what we know is that they are mainly driven by economic motives, ransom payment. But unfortunately, we have seen a change in their mode of operation. They are now killing more people than they are abducting. For example, last December, they abducted 600 people, over 600 people, but killed over 800. So they are killing more people than they are abducting. And there could be other factors driving now.
So sad, and thank you so much for the perspective. Another sad scenario is the fact that kidnapping has returned to the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway. And this, we thought that, that ended at some point, but it's sad that that has returned. The IG said he's returning a very highly equipped team on that expressway. But then we hope that the authorities will do something and do it fast, because what happens is that where your biggest or your strongest link is being vulnerable, it tells a story of the vulnerability of the entire piece. So that's the story of the security situation in Nigeria. But thank you so much. Bulama Bukati is a fellow, research fellow with the Tony Blair Foundation Institute in London. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you, John. Of course, I did not represent the Tony Blair Institute on this interview. I did it as a Nigerian and as an expert who follows these activities on daily basis.
Thank you so much indeed. I appreciate it. Well, that's our show tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm sure I'll see you tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye.